All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really tackle a sprawling subject. I mean, this is a huge one. We're talking about the business empire of Donald Trump as it stands early April 2025.
Wow, yeah.
You send over a collection of reports and analyses, and it's a lot to go through. So really, our mission today is to kind of cut through the complexity and extract the core insights. We really want you to walk away with a good sense of how this organization operates, what makes it tick, without feeling like you've just been bombarded with information.
Exactly, yeah. We've been combing through all sorts of stuff, news articles and financial reports, organizational profiles, trying to piece together this really complicated landscape. The goal here isn't to drown you in data, but to equip you with a streamlined path to being well-informed about this really, really intricate network.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Big picture first. When we look at the overall scale of this, what's the headline figure we're talking about here? Net worth and the main types of assets. What are we looking at?
So current estimates put his net worth somewhere around $5 billion as of early 2025. And this is, anchored by a really diverse set of holdings. You've got, of course, real estate. And those are some of the instantly recognizable properties, right? Mar-a-Lago, the Trump International Hotels. You also have a significant portfolio of golf courses. These are global, but Trump Turnberries may be a prime example.
Right. Real estate, hospitality, those are probably the first things that come to mind for most people. But as you said, diverse, I mean, it goes way beyond that, right?
Oh, absolutely. It extends into media and technology as well, most notably through the Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, and their platform, Truth Social. And, we should note that his majority stake in this venture does significantly influence his overall net worth. But, the stock's been a bit volatile, so it's less predictable compared to some of those more traditional holdings.
So a significant move into the tech space with Truth Social, but what other ventures are we talking about here? What else is in the mix?
Well, there's also been some forays into the world of cryptocurrency, specifically with World Liberty Financial. This is a newer development, and, it's faced some headwinds. They've had reported token sales falling quite a bit short of initial expectations. I think about $12 million raised versus a $300 million target. And then maybe surprisingly to some, there's actually a big chunk of his business tied up in licensing deals. And this covers a really wide range of things, everything from Bibles to cologne. And it seems like there was a real push in this area. Reports indicate they created something like 25 new entities in, the lead up to late 2024, specifically for these kinds of ventures.
Bibles and cologne, that's quite a spectrum. So we have this really wide array of assets. But how is this all structured? How's it run? I mean, it sounds incredibly complex to manage all of that.
It really is. The central hub is the Trump Organization. And, the best way to describe it is probably a privately held, family-run conglomerate. So essentially a company that owns all these different businesses in different sectors. Mm-hmm. And that family involvement, I think, is really crucial to understanding how it operates. It's a structure that is maybe less formal and very much driven by the personality and the brand itself. And we're talking about a pretty substantial number of individual companies involved here, maybe around 500 by some estimates. And those are operating across all these different areas that we've been talking about.
500 companies. That is a lot to oversee. How does it all connect? I mean, at the top, what's that organizational chart look like?
Well, it's a pretty layered corporate structure. It involves numerous LLCs, limited liability companies, and corporations. And those various entities ultimately report up to the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust, which was created after the 2016 election to manage his assets. And of course, as you alluded to, family members like Eric and Donald Trump Jr., they hold, pretty significant executive positions within this organization. And this whole web of LLCs and the Revocable Trust, it's actually a fairly common tool for managing these kind of complex holdings. Mm. It can offer certain legal and financial advantages, though it also can contribute to, perception of a lack of transparency, perhaps.
And, I mean, this kind of structure has faced its fair share of scrutiny in the past, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah, there have been questions raised and even significant legal challenges concerning the level of transparency, adherence to standardized procedures, and the 2023 fraud ruling, which included, orders for the cancellation of some of those business certificates. I mean, that really brought some of those operational complexities and legal issues into really sharp focus.
Yeah, that ruling definitely sent, shockwaves through the business world. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about growth. I mean, what are the primary factors that have fueled the expansion of this, frankly, quite diverse empire?
Well, the undeniable anchor here is the personal brand. The Trump name carries a lot of recognition, a certain cachet. and it's been strategically leveraged through these licensing deals. It gives those products and services an immediate boost in market appeal. You put the name on it, and people are going to take notice. And of course, his celebrity status, greatly amplified by The Apprentice, that just further cemented that visibility and opened up even more avenues for those licensing opportunities. I think you can argue that The Apprentice really took him from a well-known real estate figure to a globally recognized name.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate, I think, the impact of The Apprentice in terms of solidifying that public persona and extending its reach.
Absolutely. And beyond the brand itself, I think there's also a clear pattern of adaptability. We see this with the ventures into media through TMTG and then, more recently, cryptocurrency. It shows a willingness to kind of venture into new and evolving markets. And then we can't overlook the element of, risk-taking. Large-scale real estate projects, by their very nature, involve a lot of financial risk. And he's definitely demonstrated a propensity for taking those kind of leaps over the years. It's a high-stakes, potentially high-reward approach.
Sounds like walking a tightrope at times. But of course, there's also the undeniable impact of his public image, which, to put it mildly, is very divisive. How does that factor into the business? How does that play a role?
Well, it's a fascinating and complex dynamic, that polarizing public image. It definitely resonates strongly with a certain segment of the population. We see this in things like political spending at his properties, for example. And, even the Secret Service costs incurred at Mar-a-Lago during his first administration totaled at least $1.75 million. Wow. So that gives you a pretty tangible illustration of that. But at the same time, that same image can lead to boycotts and alienate potential customers. So it creates both opportunities and challenges for the business, simultaneously. And of course, the ability to secure financing for those large ventures plays a huge role.
It's a real push and pull, I guess. So in terms of this expansion, this growth, were there key moments? Were there specific events that acted as major catalysts? What would you pinpoint as this, the most significant kind of turning points?
Well, I think you have to start with Trump Tower back in the 1980s. That was, kind of a foundational moment. It really established his reputation in high-end real estate and I think laid the groundwork for many of the future developments.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as we've discussed, The Apprentice was a real game changer, just in terms of boosting his global profile. And you saw just this explosion in the number of licensing deals that followed. I mean, it really took him from being a successful real estate developer to, a household name across the globe.
Yeah, took him far beyond that real estate world.
Exactly. And then, of course, the political career, particularly his time as president, brought just an unprecedented level of attention, both positive and negative, to his brand, to his properties. It had those downsides, boycotts being a prime example, but it also had significant benefits, Mar-a-Lago becoming this focal point for political events, generating a ton of media coverage. And we should also consider strategic partnerships like that Oman hotel deal back in 2022, which can be a way to, unlock new markets and new opportunities. And then finally, significant investments in those new ventures, like, for example, that reported $30 million investment from Justin Sun in World Liberty Financial. That kind of capital infusion can be really critical for expansion.
Okay. So we've looked at the current state, the factors that have driven growth. But what about looking ahead? What are some of the key potential impacts and challenges that we see on the horizon for this business empire? What are some of the things to keep an eye on?
Well, there's several factors that could really shape the future here. Economic downturns are always a concern, particularly for sectors like real estate and hospitality. They tend to be sensitive to those broader economic shifts. We saw some of that impact with the job reductions back in 2020. And then the ongoing legal challenges present both financial and reputational risks. The 2023 fraud conviction and the financial penalty associated with that, the $355 million payment, it's a significant hit. And those legal battles, they can potentially impact future financing options as well. So there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, those legal issues they definitely cast a long shadow.
They do. Regulatory changes, things like shifts in zoning laws, those can have a direct impact on real estate development and operations. And as we've talked about, public perception remains this really powerful and unpredictable force. It can both bolster and hinder business depending on how those actions and, that public image are received by different segments of the population. You also have competitive pressures from other developers. And technology is constantly evolving. Think about the growth of online booking platforms in the hospitality industry. Those are ongoing challenges. And we should at least briefly consider the recent tariff policies implemented in 2025, which could have some broader implications for global business operations. To really assess the specific impact on these ventures, though, would require, more detailed analysis.
A lot of moving parts. So, I mean, reflecting on everything that we've covered today, what are some of the key business lessons that someone could maybe glean, take away from studying this, pretty unique empire, this case study, if you will?
Well, I think there are quite a few. The power of branding and personal reputation as highly valuable business assets, I think that's a clear lesson here, particularly when you look at the sheer volume of licensing deals. The strategy of diversification, moving into all these different sectors, can be seen as a way to spread risk, although it also presents the challenge of, maintaining expertise across all those diverse fields. And I think those ventures into media and cryptocurrency, they highlight the importance of being adaptable, exploring new markets as they emerge. Strong negotiation skills have clearly been essential in securing deals and financing over the years. And while that willingness to take risks has been a defining characteristic, I think the earlier casino bankruptcies, those served as a pretty potent reminder of the potential pitfalls of overextending financially.
Yeah, that balance between risk and potential overreach it's a crucial one to strike.
It is. And I think maybe most fundamentally, given the history of controversies and allegations, the importance of ethical conduct and transparency in business practices, that cannot be overstated. It's a vital lesson for anyone, aspiring to lead a successful and sustainable business.
Couldn't agree more. So just to kind of recap here, we've explored a business empire characterized by, really significant scale, this wide-ranging diversity, and heavily reliant on, a potent personal brand and this readiness to embrace new ventures, to take on risk. But it also faces these persistent headwinds from, economic uncertainties, these ongoing legal challenges, and a really deeply divided public opinion. It's a tricky path to navigate.
It is. It's a fascinating interplay of those traditional business approaches alongside the more contemporary forays into things like media and technology.
Well, this has been a truly insightful deep dive into a very unique business organization. And it leads us to a final thought for you, for our listeners. Considering this blend of, those established industries and the newer ventures, what do you see as the most significant long-term opportunity? Or maybe the biggest potential challenge for an organization so intrinsically linked to the brand, the public image of a single individual? That's something to ponder, I think, as we look to the future. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.